All right, OBR subscribers, Jared Mueller coming to you here just after the game, and this was something that I had planned to do just for you guys, and hopefully moving forward, the next couple of weeks are around my birthday and some time with family, so I may unfortunately not be able to pull off the videos, but I will do my best to do so. But going to talk a little bit about the game, reviewing today's game. A loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in overtime, a game that just has a lot of interesting decision making behind it and those kind of things. I'm going to talk a little bit about coaching, both as part of the game review and just in general. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about future decisions, some of the things that I've brought up in Rumor Central and in ATI that I think are interesting, at least from what I'm hearing. And then I've put in some contacts to try to see if anything has changed based on today's game. But I'll talk through a little bit of that and why what we're hearing in Berea is going to be a little bit interesting how the next week or so plays out as we move forward towards the NFL trade deadline, which is on October 30th, my birthday. So let's start with the game review. I just want to look at some of the statistics. Not really anything that particularly jumps out at me per se, but just interesting to look at. Jameis Winston, 32 for 52. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers threw the ball 52 times for 365 yards, 2 interceptions, no touchdowns. And so like you guys saw in my game preview with Jameis Winston in the video, he is a type of quarterback that is going to keep teams in the game. He struggles with dropping underneath linebackers, which we saw with those 2 interceptions today, as well as trying to force the ball in. And so when we think about what does a top shelf franchise quarterback look like, many people thought or still think that Jameis Winston is that kind of guy. Take everything you know about him off the field, put that to the side. On the field, Jameis Winston is the type of quarterback who will throw for 365 yards, complete 32 of 52 passes, but throw 2 interceptions. He'll fumble the ball, which we saw in that fumbled exchange from center, but he'll also fumble the ball, just getting hit, those kind of things. And so Jameis Winston threw for some big yards, 365 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And then you look at the Bucs running game, 10 attempts for Winston for 55 yards. Where you see him kind of break down the Browns defense pretty regularly today was when he was running the ball. Besides that, Peyton Barber, 11 attempts for 30 yards. Ronald Jones, 6 attempts for 13. Deshaun Jackson, 2 for 8. He had that 1 touchdown run for 14 yards where the Browns struggle against the reverse. And then Jacquizz Rodgers, 3 for 8. So the Browns defense overall held the running game down except for Jameis Winston. And in the passing game, obviously Jameis threw for a lot of yards, but they did a lot of bend but not break. You saw Greg Williams' aggressive defense start to tire out at different times, struggle with certain things. So underneath receivers, the reverse that led to the touchdown for Deshaun Jackson. But you also saw what happened when you have a quarterback who will keep their opponent in the game, which was what Jameis Winston did. And so the Browns, there's a match there, right? Like most boxing matches, the matchup between defenses and quarterbacks make a big difference in how a game goes. So today's example, Greg Williams' ultra-aggressive defense, Jameis Winston's penchant for throwing interceptions and turning the ball over, works well. Didn't work so well against Phillip Rivers, who has done a lot better over the last 5-10 years of his career than he did earlier in his career turning the ball over, and he just dissected Williams' defense. On the Brown side of things, Nick Chubb replaces Carlos Hyde and does pretty well. 18 carries for 80 yards. I know Bob Evans is going to talk about his yards per carry, and those will be interesting conversations, but we know it's over 4. I can do that simple math in my head. Less than 20 attempts for 80 yards means that Nick Chubb had over a 4-yard per carry average, which is something we're looking for. And then Baker Mayfield obviously had his huge 35-yard run, which should have also had a 15-yard penalty, but the referee decided to say he's a runner so he can get hit in the head. And it was helmet to helmet. Again, we can talk referees all day long. Until the Browns earn respect by winning games, by having a winning culture, playing winning style of football, they're not going to get those calls. Whether you or I like it is a conversation we can have later. And some of you are going to say, but Jared, it's those calls that keep them from becoming a winning football team. I absolutely agree with you. But until they start overcoming those calls, overcoming their reputation, and there are enough penalties that the Browns do commit that they deserve to kind of be looked at from the referees as not a team that is well disciplined. And so they're going to be under the referee's eyes a little bit more. But again, just terrible call. He should have been called for 15-yard penalty for helmet to helmet, for hitting Baker Mayfield in the head. He had already been sliding. Dean Blandino also admitted that. But here we are. Again, penalty after penalty. But Baker Mayfield, 43 yards on 4 carries, and then passing the ball. You know, you would probably be surprised if you were just watching the game, but Baker went 23 for 34. Here's the number that really sticks out to me and probably sticks out to you, and that is that in 23 pass attempts, he only completed for 215 yards. Now, he had his 2 touchdowns, which are great, obviously, but the fact that Baker is only able to complete 215 yards will tell us a little bit about some of the decision-making and what the coaching was doing. It tells us a little bit about the players that Baker has to play with right now, and tells us a little bit about what we might be concerned about Baker Mayfield and how this season could impact him. Jarvis Landry was targeted 15 times, caught 10 of those balls for 97 yards. And I will have to say, throughout the game, I couldn't understand why he was the one getting deep balls. It just didn't make sense to me. He doesn't tend to get separation, and he's not big enough where he can make those plays to go up and get the ball. Late in the game, he made some huge plays, including obviously that one-play touchdown drive where he caught the ball and was smart enough to extend the ball over the goal line and get the touchdown. Njoku, 4 receptions, 52 yards, and his touchdown. Again, did he have a perfect game? No. I would say he had 1 drop, obviously, and then another one where the defender was right there and just a really difficult play. One of the things that I hit on Twitter that some people were not happy with or didn't understand is that it seems pretty obvious that there are types of balls that David Njoku struggles with. Those balls are pretty simple. They are balls going away from the line of scrimmage and out towards the sidelines. And so that is a very specific type of body control, very specific type of use of your eyes and your hands all at the same time that it seems like are a real big struggle for him. So you're talking about outs. You're talking about those kind of flag plays where he's going away from the line of scrimmage and towards the sideline. Where he does well are going to be on those slants, on those seam routes, or balls where he can get his body turned around, including his touchdown in the end zone, where he was able to get his body turned around so he wasn't totally going away from the line of scrimmage and towards the sideline. He was able to square up. Does that mean we're just giving him a pass? No. But coaches need to understand what their players do well and scheme for that. I really wouldn't have Njoku doing a flag route, doing an out route, unless I purposely was doing that to clear out defenders for somebody coming underneath, which we'll talk about here in a second. And so some really interesting stats again. Duke Johnson, 4 catches, 23 yards, 1 carry. 1 carry. You get rid of Carlos Hyde and you give Duke Johnson 1 carry and 4 targets. I just don't understand it. John Dorsey obviously likes Duke Johnson. He gave him that extension. If not, you probably would have seen him traded. You have Nick Chubb, a rookie, getting 18 carries, fine. And instead, you just throw the ball 34 times with Baker Mayfield. I don't understand some of the coaching decisions about using players to their best ability. Duke Johnson coming out of the backfield is a weapon for the Browns. He is. You can see a number of times he was actually open, that he didn't get the ball because he wasn't a primary receiver or they used him as a decoy on one of the kind of wide receiver type screens that he came back over to the right-hand side. In the end, the Browns have to do a better job of getting their playmakers involved. When you look at the Bucs, Mike Evans, 11 targets, O.J. Howard, 9 targets, Chris Godwin, 6 targets, Humphreys, 8 targets, who probably is a relatively good comparison to the type of player, not quality, but type of player that Duke Johnson is. 8 targets, even though they caught the ball 4 times. Deshaun Jackson, 5 targets. So again, they're trying to get their playmakers involved. The Browns, Duke Johnson got 5 opportunities to make a play. 4 receptions for 23 yards and a negative 4-yard carry. Not exactly highly impactful. And so that's when I talk about decision making, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Defense, I've railed on Greg Williams' defense for a long time. Can it be successful in the NFL? Maybe. You have to be playing against certain types of quarterbacks who aren't going to pick you apart. You have to have top-level players pretty much across the field. You got to get lucky sometimes. And you got to hope that when you do what you always do, the other team just can't take advantage of it. You saw that on the Bucs. The Browns came with a blitz, and they had a perfect screen set up. Thankfully, the Bucs got called for holding on Myles Garrett, who was creating havoc in the backfield, which allowed Emmanuel Ogbah to make plays, those kind of things. If you're just looking at the stats, and I got to scroll down a little bit here on the NFL's media site, when do we get down to Myles Garrett? 2 tackles. Both of them were sacks for 12 yards. That's what the statistics say about Myles Garrett. 2 sacks are great, obviously wonderful. But then you look and you see that Emmanuel Ogbah had 4 tackles, 1.5 sack. Larry Ogunjobi, they gave a half sack to. A lot of the pressure you saw, Jamie Collins got into the backfield, caused some pressure. A lot of what you saw is because of the attention Myles Garrett takes. The unfortunate problem with that is that this defense can't carry this team. Not that they're not good. There's a lot of quality there, and there's a lot of aggressiveness there. But it's tough to win when your defense is kind of all or nothing. Early in the game, first half, first 3 quarters, turnovers were, and really the whole game, turnovers were really the only thing that kept the Browns in this game, and that's really Jameis Winston. Besides that, the defense was bending, not breaking, but bending, and then they broke at different times. And so with the Browns defense, most often, you're either going to have the other team score or you're going to have a turnover. There really is no in between. If you have an offense that can capitalize on those turnovers, great. The Browns currently do not have an offense that has been capitalizing on those turnovers. And so you have the Browns. Let's get down to the punting statistics. Oh, those aren't on here because that's not that important. So you have the Browns punting 9 times. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers punted 4 times in a game that went to overtime. So we're not talking about a game that was significantly the Bucs had outscored the Browns. The Browns punted 9 times in a game that went to overtime where the Bucs punted 4 times. Those are significantly different numbers, and the reason for that is that the Browns had their takeaways, right? But the Bucs are either scoring, or the Browns are taking the ball away, or there's 4 punts. Thankfully, the Browns didn't have those kind of turnovers, and so that obviously helps the team out. But again, you can't have a defense that's going to be kind of all or nothing all the time without an offense that's going to be able to capitalize. And if, unfortunately, the Browns' offense hasn't been able to capitalize, partially because they're not using their playmakers. The other part is very frustrating that on first or second down, when Baker Mayfield goes back to pass, he only has deep routes, or almost always only has deep routes as his primary, secondary, and sometimes third receiver options are all long developing routes, which means Baker has to hold the ball for a while. That means when pressure gets there, because Chris Hubbard and Desmond Harrison are struggling, he doesn't have an outlet. Yet on third down, when it's 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, 3rd and whatever, when the Browns need those yards, Baker has Jarvis Landry 2 yards in front of the line of scrimmage, not even on a screen pass, has Damian Ratley, Antonio Cal, whoever. He has those outlets, but not on first and second down. On first and second down, when you're running those deep routes, you guys have seen this against Greg Williams' defense. You run enough of those deep routes, you can bring that short crosser. You can have a running back coming out of the backfield. You can have a tight end chip and then go out into a pattern that generally is going to be open. Because as those deep routes go, it spreads out the defense and leaves little spaces for a quick throw, a little bit of run, and there's a big difference between 2nd and 10 and 2nd and 4. 2nd and 3, 2nd and 2, 2nd and 5 even. Those are huge differences between what can be called then. Unfortunately, very often the Browns didn't make those plays, except you saw in the first drive. The first drive, when the Browns started to get something going, you saw a quick throw to Jarvis Landry, quick throw to Duke Johnson. You saw Nick Chubb out of the backfield. You saw 3 of their best playmakers getting the ball. Later in the game, you saw David Njoku get the ball. Overall, the decision-making when it comes to play calling is a struggle. You also don't have backs or tight ends helping 2 tackles who are struggling greatly against Jason Pierre-Paul, who is a very, very good pass rusher, especially when the Bucs didn't have Gerald McCoy in the middle, so they didn't need as much help protecting in the middle. Just a frustrating decision-making process. Overall, my concern for Baker Mayfield is that he will learn to just check down the ball. He will learn and get frustrated that his players can't or won't make plays down the field, and he'll start to become Derek Carr is a great example of a player who early in his career did okay, a lot of hope that he would develop, and over time has become check down Charlie, and just isn't able to make enough plays down the field. Now, Baker Mayfield's mindset is impressive, so maybe not. But it is something to kind of keep an eye on. You can see he is an energy guy. While an energy guy is great, sometimes an energy guy is controlled by his energy. So he comes down when things aren't going well, up when they're going well, those kind of things. So I believe there's a terminology of, and someone's going to tell me what the exact statement is, but we don't want Baker Mayfield to be a thermometer telling us the temperature of the room. We want Baker Mayfield to be the thermostat deciding the temperature of the room, right? And so I think the Browns have to be very careful about how they use him. Coaching, overall, really frustrated by the coaching. On offense, what's Hugh and what's Haley? I don't always know. I do know there's levels to Hugh's ability to kind of take control of the wheel and more so the gas pedal and the brake pedal, how fast they're going to go, how hard they're going to go, what they're going to go for, what they're not going to go for. Decisions to go for it instead of kicking field goal at the end of the half seems to be something that people easily are pointing to. Now, if he had made that field goal, could things have gone differently? Absolutely. Assuming everything else about the game would have gone exactly the same, so the Browns would have won the game at the end of regulation, is silly. That's just not how things happen, but it's easy to point back to. Overall, I don't know what this means for the Browns' future. I noted in Rumor Central that today's game actually really could play a huge impact on what John Dorsey thinks and how aggressive he gets moving forward. But first he has to make a decision about coaching. Coaching kind of is something that's just kind of hanging over all of these decisions. Why? Do I get aggressive to get players who maybe fit with this coaching staff or this coaching staff likes and spend some resources when I don't plan to have this coaching staff later? If I don't believe this coaching staff can coach this team this year, do I get anybody that's on a one-year deal? For example, do I re-sign Terrell Pryor? Do I trade for someone who I might let go? And even if it's just giving up a 5th-round pick, a 6th-round pick, something like that, is it really worth it? I don't know. And do you want to bring in somebody who has to deal with coaches maybe you don't believe in, and then they have turnover if you're planning on having them for long term? Is that something you want to do? I don't know. What I do know is, in the building, in general, no one really likes Hugh Jackson. That's what I'm being told. Now, does that mean I'm right and that literally no one likes Hugh Jackson? No. In the end, the only thing that matters is, does Jimmy and Dee Haslam still believe in Hugh Jackson? If they do, John Dorsey has no power to fire Hugh. He can influence the Haslams, though. But if he fires Hugh, who do you want to take over? Todd Haley has shown that his play calling is suspect at best. There are a lot of concerns about how he makes decisions. Could he be handcuffed by Hugh Jackson? It's very possible. But do you want him taking over? The ultra-aggressive Greg Williams doesn't seem to lead a very intelligent, smart team on his side of the ball. He leads a very aggressive team, but a lot of poor decision making, a lot of over aggressiveness, a lot of decisions that sound great, but aren't balanced out by intelligence, by smart thinking. So fire Hugh Jackson. Then who takes over? Al Saunders? He'd be my guy. So when it comes to the trades, I don't actually know. I don't know what decisions are going to be made. I do know a lot of the names that are starting to come out. So Amari Cooper, Demaryius Thomas, those are two names that I had heard. Another wide receiver name that I had heard, again, very generically talked about, that the Browns have at least made some conversations about. And you probably haven't heard this one anywhere else. And it doesn't mean anything's going to happen or that their team is going to make that move. But I'm told that the Cleveland Browns have talked to the Indianapolis Colts about T.Y. Hilton, take the top off the defense kind of threat down the field. The Colts are trying to make a decision about what does their future hold. Is he a good use of their cap space with all of his injury history and those kind of things? Is it just better to kind of take a move? And what would that cost the Browns to bring in a player like T.Y. Hilton? I don't think that's the move that's going to be made. In the end, though, it's important to know that just because you're hearing other names, Demaryius Thomas, Amari Cooper, those kind of guys, doesn't mean that those are the only names that John Dorsey has been out there. He's been looking at a variety of players on special teams. He's looked at kickers. He hasn't looked at punters. He's looked at players who can return the ball, because with Jabril Peppers, you're dealing with a great return, which led to the touchdown, and you're looking at the fumble, right? So you're looking at a player who, much like the defensive coordinator he is under, very aggressive, very much wants to make plays, not always the smartest when he's making those plays. And so those are some of the names that we've heard at the wide receiver position. We know from Lane Atkins that the Browns have talked to a number of teams about a number of positions all over the field: linebacker, defensive back, I believe defensive line. So far we haven't heard much on the offensive line, but that would not surprise me as well. But again, those decisions are going to be really, really tough for John Dorsey. Do I spend resources because I think this team is close? And how many of those resources do I spend with the idea that I'm not sure if this coaching staff can get the best out of those resources? Time will tell. We have a little over a week before the NFL trade deadline. John Dorsey has a lot of decisions to make, including starting with, is this loss, and are the other losses so far this season, are those on Hugh Jackson? And if they are, is Todd Haley, Greg Williams, Al Saunders, or any of those coaches right to take over? That first decision could decide how aggressive John Dorsey and the Cleveland Browns are going into this trade deadline. Thanks, subscribers. I hope you enjoy. We'll do some videos like this. Again, they'll be password protected on YouTube, so they're only for you. So I hope you enjoy. Have a great night, and go Browns.